Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman, Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is October. How do you like that? Maybe I'll just leave it at that. Surprise! It's October. It's time for an October surprise, I guess. That's what's supposed to happen this month, except that it's not supposed to happen anymore because people are already voting or something. But Donald Trump is nothing if not a traditionalist, except for the part about keeping the traditions about what the presidency should be doing. The tradition with him, of course, is gimmitarianism. Caveman gimmitarianism. Whatever I want it now, and if I don't get it, I'll beat you over the head or have someone else do it for me. All right, we'll catch up on what's happening this morning and here and around the world. And let's see, what does Twitter tell me? Twitter tells me that the trending topic in the United States is rabbit. Does anybody know what rabbit is? I certainly don't, actually, and now I'm curious, and they've got me curious, but I won't reward them with a click on it. But what the hell is it? Just, all right, it's about rabbits. I don't know. There's rabbit. That comes up. All right, well, I guess I'm going to have to click on it if I want to find out. Am I that curious? I don't think so. Let's see. The Irish Supreme Court has ruled that Subway bread isn't bread. I guess I'm somewhat curious about that. Twitter people just seem hung up on things that aren't that interesting or that important. In the entertainment world, I guess, well, this is really rotten to kind of include this as entertainment somehow, but the people involved are entertainers, so I don't know. Never mind, forget it. It's a whole stupid thing, and it doesn't belong on our show, quite honestly, but I guess Twitter has forgotten overnight who I am and what I like, so I must have flipped the switch somewhere. Maybe I was fooling around with the settings to see if I could make things a little bit better for myself in the morning for news gathering, as I saw Greg complaining about the auto refresh feature, the bane of everyone's existence. I guess he was in the middle of working on something, probably something for this show too, bringing us some kind of interesting link to share with us, and the program auto refreshed him right out of it. I see that happen to me all the time. Lose what I'm looking at if I don't press the links fast enough. But I guess that's what they're trying to do. Drive you to press those links faster and give them more work to do, I guess, and serve up all the news and information you want. And if you hesitate for just a second, no news for you. All right, so it is October 1st, 2020. We didn't say it at the outset of the show. I think you figured it out from the context. Let's see. We are ready to go, sort of, with another show. Daily Co's Radio is live now. We tell you this each day. Bill helps us tell you, at least Monday through Thursday. Sometimes sleeping in and getting ready to deliver his afternoon front page post on Fridays. But usually there for us, and there's no contract, and there's no big pile of gold at the end of the rainbow or anything like that. So we thank him for it. Daily Coast Radio is live now. I'll figure out what the hell I'm going to do here. We're going to deliver a secret coded message to his followers. That's right. It was rabbit, apparently. Stand back and stand by. Ah, yes. Everybody's favorite secret message for broadcasting excellence. Wink, wink. We were just kidding about that. Yeah. All right. Wow. All right. I got to change directions immediately now for this notice from Rebecca Romans, who tells us, this is prime Alabama. How do we know it's from Alabama? It says so on the sign, and it is a picture of a sign in an elevator that says, well, for one thing, cameras are watching. That's good. And it says it's happening it says in big red letters, Alabama at the bottom. It's in the University of Alabama. So I guess that makes a little bit more sense now that I read the top of the sign, which says, do not click buttons with genitalia. So I think they're probably talking to the gents here at this point, but gender, non-binary, and all that. So they don't bother addressing it to one gender or another, or both, or all 3 or 13 or whatever we happen to be up to this week, or whatever. The number's not important. It's what you do with what you have, no matter how you got it, or what you don't do in this case. Quite honestly, it does remind you that cameras are watching, and so that should be an added incentive not to do it. For some people, it's an incentive to do it. I suppose it's not an extraordinarily tall building that this is posted in, so I don't know what the bragging rights are here. You can only go up to the 6th floor, so it's not like, whatever. Well, don't. And also, I don't know how comfortable it would be. Probably not good for your reproductive health either. We'll ask Greg Dworkin as he joins us here. Oh, and I think I'm going to have to turn down the sound just a little bit, maybe on our Skype input. I boosted it the other day for Joan, but I guess things are back to normal now, and you're coming through loud and clear. So good morning, Greg, or at least the chimes were. How are you?
So I shouldn't yell at you.
You can now. If you catch me violating this University of Alabama policy, go ahead.
You do what you can with what you got, right? I mean,
Yeah.
That's what they mean.
Right.
That's what the sign should
like,
say.
It's good I live on a low floor. I don't know. What kind of? This is some kind of interesting thing. So down at the University of Alabama, COVID not necessarily your biggest health challenge.
Oh, I thought they were talking about spreading disease.
Yeah, well, this is clearly the case, and there are spreading that. Well, or maybe that's just these signs that say wash your hands frequently is not working. However, now it should
just say
beautiful.
Like wash everything.
Yeah, I guess so. But if you put up a sign that says,
let's just be totally neutral about this. Just shower regularly.
Maybe that's
Thank you very much.
Silkwood style.
When you were at university and you go away for 4 years, you still have to shower.
That's true, and it's a good idea. And if the kids weren't washing their hands, putting up a sign that says, please don't press the elevator buttons with genitalia will get you washing.
Yeah, that's just the way it goes. So let's change topic
or
here.
Not.
Let's talk a little bit about the election.
Or not. No, go ahead, please.
Well, but yeah, let's talk about the election. So our friend Taniel writes, if Trump loses, many Republicans will want you to know that they were the ones who were anonymously concerned and aggrieved about his racism and authoritarianism.
And pressing the buttons.
Yeah. So, you step back and you look at the bigger picture. And this is actually, it's an interesting time, Tale of Two Cities, right? Good times, bad times, best of times, worst of times. The response by Trump on everything is bad, he is bad. The huge splash page today on the New York Times, which I sent you, the whole entire front page is Trump is screwing up everything. It's pretty amazing. I mean, I don't know where this coverage was for 3.5 years because nothing's changed.
Yeah.
But here it is. Trump escalates push to erode trust and vote. Big banner headline. As you may know, one of the things that Nate Silver has incorporated into this year's prediction model over at 538, for reasons which may be obscure, is how much attention big stories get. What kind of banner headlines do they get in outlets like the New York Times? That's factored in to the prediction that he makes. And right now, Biden's winning 79% chance to Trump's 21. So that's been an erosion of Trump's position over the past week or so.
Okay.
But we have a number of things that are all just coming together. Okay, we have Biden leading in the polls. We can go over those. We have Biden raising tons of money, and associated super PACs supporting the Biden campaign are raising tons of money. It's October 1st. And so since the last quarter just ended, when you have a really good fundraising day, you announce it like at 12:01 midnight. And when you have a really bad fundraising quarter, you announce it like October 16th. You try to put it off as much as possible. So immediately out of the gate, super PACs associated with the Biden campaign are raising hundreds of millions of dollars. And it wouldn't surprise me to hear relatively soon that Biden himself, after announcing that it was a record-breaking day, second only to the death of RBG in terms of Act Blue donations, that Biden's raised hundreds of millions of dollars this quarter. He may get $400 million.
Right.
He may get $500 million. We don't know, but
I'll give him
it's going to be a big,
$500
big number, whatever it is, upwards of $300 million. And so he's got plenty of money to play with, and so he can buy ads in Texas.
Hey, why not?
He can afford to buy ads in Florida. He could do Iowa. He could do, which is cheap. He could do Ohio, which is expensive. Georgia, he's tied in all of those situations. And when you have a poll that comes out that says South Carolina is competitive,
you want to get in.
Well, I don't know if you want to get in. You're not going to win South Carolina.
Well, if you have $400 million, you do.
But just imagine if the headline was Joe Biden and Trump within a couple of points of each other in California. And
all right.
What would happen?
Yes.
Like everybody would jump out of windows.
Oh. Well, that's
hair on fire stuff. Oh my God! What do you mean we're tied in? How's the race going?
Well, I'd want to at least say, let's get in for the Senate guy down there. Something like that.
Something. But the point is
and
that if Ohio and Iowa and Georgia and Texas are competitive, and Michigan and Minnesota and all the places that Trump is spending time in appear to be off the table, he's not running a very good campaign.
All right. Well,
okay, more. Joe Biden's getting great crowds and local headlines on his Whistle Stop tour. He's going to all those small town places between Ohio and Pennsylvania. And besides, he loves trains, so it's like perfect for him. And Dave Wasserman notes, one of the funny things that happens is when you stop in small towns, you're actually getting a lot of local press, and people have been tweeting around the local headlines, which are all, fantastic for Biden. But you're also making a play for suburban areas, or as Wasserman puts it, and this is kind of a backhand slap at suburbanites, suburban people really love that you're going to those places that they haven't been there in years, but respect you for going.
Oh, okay.
But, it's good press. It's definitely good press, whether that's true or not true. That's the observation he made. But it's definitely good press, and Biden's doing great on that. Trump is still dealing with debate fallout. There's all these stories about how he thinks he did a great job and nobody wants to tell him.
I know. I will if he wants to talk.
Well, I won't.
We'll get in an elevator.
I think he did such a good job, he'll do the same thing at the town hall next time he's debating.
Yeah. Oh, I think he knows how to do those. That's it's going to be interesting.
I think I've seen him do them. I think he doesn't.
Oh, well, he's not great at it, but I know he's not.
He's not real good at empathy. No, he's not. And he's
but
not.
he knows
good
he's
at
supposed to.
What if
sit
somebody
there?
asks him about the pandemic? Because every time somebody asks him about the pandemic, he goes bonkers.
But he didn't interrupt the questioners that much. Well, not the way he did in this debate.
No, he didn't interrupt them. He just had.
He didn't
listen to their questions. He didn't answer them properly. Mm-hmm. Oh, your mom died of cancer? Well, what about coronavirus? She died of coronavirus, right? That would make a much bigger story. So let's make it that.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm talking about my family and what actually happened. Well, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in this other topic. So let me change it. I mean, that's what happened at a town debate, at a town hall he did, and it was awful. And, he was roundly panned for it. And so I don't think he does those all that well. And that's one of the reasons why I don't think there's anything to this talk that, maybe there won't be more debates. Mm-hmm. Trump thinks he won, and so he wants them. Biden thinks that town halls are his best format, so he wants them. And so that's the end of that. But what was interesting is that as all of America was watching the first debate and screaming, cut the mic, shut the mic on that guy.
Yes.
The debate commission comes out and says, you know what, we might shut off the mic on that guy if he does it again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was kind of good to see.
People are saying, well, the moderator, Chris Wallace, he can't shut off the mic. That's ridiculous. No, that's exactly what he should have done, and of course he could. Well, but it's against the rule. Well, just tell everybody that guy broke the rules, so you're breaking the rules. It's easy, and then it's done, and then you can't do anything about it. Well, he couldn't have done that. Of course he did. And as a matter of fact, not only could he have, the next round, they're going to do that.
Yes, I'm a little. I'm little split on that. I feel like that's something you need to do. I know, although I don't really want to mitigate the damage he's doing to himself when he shouts over everybody.
But you have to let people listen to the other guy.
I guess so. Go to the website,
and you don't do it by having the moderator have an on-off switch. You have the control room shut off the mic when it's not your turn, and turn it on when it is your turn. And everybody knows the rules in advance, and so you take it out of the moderator's hands and don't make it on him. Because the moderator's going to screw up if you ask the moderator to do it.
That's
true. It was
true.
a special occasion the first
happening.
time. Wallace should have just done it once in the first 2 minutes and say, this is not how it's going to go. Both of you have a timeout. Go to your room.
Both. Well, I don't know. They do need to change the rules, although my suspicion is that they'll change the rules. The town hall format will force a different reaction from Trump. Then he'll get a pivot story. And then they'll undo we don't need those rules after all. And then for the third debate, and then he goes crazy. They shouldn't let a decent
helps
performance in the second one.
It doesn't matter if that's in fact what happens. But I don't see that happening.
Well, I don't want to
see what happening is that Trump lost the first debate, and then he loses the second debate on terms he can understand.
Okay.
And then after it sinks in that he's lost both debates, then he's not going to want to do anymore, but he's going to have to, and he's going to come out sedated.
I would like to see that.
It's funny. In a not funny way, Tim Alberta, who is a Trump whisperer and a conservative who writes for Politico and is a good reporter in the sense that, he's got great conservative sources and documents stuff, but definitely sees things from a Republican point of view and a conservative point of view.
Okay.
As this article in the magazine section, Trump is not the man he used to be. His belligerent debate performance revealed the president has lost the confidence he had 4 years ago, and it will cost him. And it's about how bad he did in this debate, but the backdrop to it is how well he did in the Clinton debates, which nobody else thought. It's just really weird reading. But he was confident, and he was self-assured and joking, and everybody liked his performance 4 years ago. All the polls show that he lost the debates. That's not why Clinton lost the election. But in his revisionist mind, Trump was a masterful debater last time, and now he's lost a bunch of steps. When in fact, it's the same person he was 4 years ago. It's just that you're seeing it in a different light now because he's the president, and you don't expect presidential behavior of this sort. But it's the same behavior.
Yeah. All right. I don't know what he's trying to get through with that, but okay.
Well, it's people need their permission structure to back off of supporting him. If this is what it takes for him to do that or other people to do that, fine. I'm okay with that.
All right.
If you want to say, well, the guy I supported 4 years ago was better than the guy that I'm supporting now. He's lost a few steps. Something's happened. I don't know what it is. Maybe that guy got to him somehow. But that's not what I remember me voting for, and I can't vote for this now. If that's what it takes in your own head to solve your cognitive dissonance problem, go for it. That's fine with me. It's just that the rest of us read this, and it's like reading about how, again, remember our blogging origins back, 2003. It's like reading, well, the Iraq War was a good idea, but it went sour for these reasons, and so now I'm not for it.
Yes, all right.
Okay, fine. It was flawed from the beginning, which we all said, yeah, but you guys are, dirty frickin' hippies, so you don't know anything. But the way I got to the correct conclusion was that originally it was a great idea. It's just that they didn't do it right. And so now I'm totally justified in not supporting the Iraq War. We've seen this movie. And so fine. If that's what it takes for you to get there, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Well,
for now. After the election, I'll remind you were an idiot. But for now, you're brilliant.
I guess so. And then we suffer with them for another couple of years.
Well, in order to win the election, there's a lot we're going to have to suffer through. It's only for another month. Yeah. And we've suffered for 3.5 years, one thing at a time. Exactly right. It's that, sometimes you got to back off and say what you are saying and what you are doing is infuriating, but vote for Biden and then we'll talk about it.
All right, I'll do it. You convinced me.
Okay, good. So, the bottom line is all of this together is really making it not much of a close election. It doesn't really look like Biden's losing. It doesn't look like Trump is winning. And, when you have, oh my gosh, now Republicans are starting to worry about 1964 style things, and how all the Senate Republicans are running away from everything Trump is doing. It's just odd because, again, things haven't changed in so long. You get to the point where you're saying, well, maybe they never will. And so when everybody was saying, oh, the polls are going to tighten, I was saying, I don't think so. Things don't change. And now that people are saying things don't change, I'm thinking, they might break for Biden.
Okay. Yeah.
They really might break
whatever
for
they're
Biden
saying
in the last
is not
3
happening.
weeks in ways that you're not anticipating, and it's a much bigger win. Of course, we said this before. The chance of a blowout are real, and people aren't talking about it enough because it's not as interesting as how can Trump come back. Nobody's talking about Trump coming back now.
Yeah.
You can't find stories like that anymore. And people are starting to talk about, Republicans are quietly wondering to themselves, is this going to be a blowout for Biden?
A little bit like I feel like now we're back on the Iraq War subject. The Iraq War was going to be a great idea, but they blew it. And the polls are going to tighten, but the polls blew it somehow by not tightening later on. But now we understand the situation and continue to read our commentary. Thank you.
A lot of political commentary is dumb. We know that. And a lot of it is wrong. We know that. But it's just, these are really interesting dynamics now. And so, it's arguably, and a lot of this is, of course, Trump's doing. But between the two statements he made, the first about not ceding power in a smooth way, not guaranteeing that he would be all in on that, and then a week later, not being able to distance himself from the Proud Boys in a style and manner
Who he doesn't know.
completely reminiscent of the Charlottesville incident that led to his lowest favorable ratings of his entire presidency. Just a couple of weeks before the election, feels something
That's
like
not
an
the time you
inflection
want it.
point. And so, it'll be very interesting to see what happens with the next set of polls that comes out and how people are reacting to this.
All right. We should look at them.
We should. Again, the purpose of polling
When they
is
happen.
to make sure that your own opinions are grounded in reality. And, when the polls come out and say, what he just did, what Trump just did is not popular, that it's not working for him to do law and order. It's not working for him to do out overt racism. I think these are all things that are, worthy of note. For example, Manu Raju tweeted that last night, as Trump tells voters in Duluth, Minnesota, what's he doing in Minnesota? It's a state he's not going to win, that Biden would inundate your state with a historic flood of refugees. He rails on Representative Ilhan Omar and criticizes her, a U.S. citizen, for telling us how to run our country.
Yeah, how dare... Wait a minute. What?
I mean, the racism is just becoming overt. Here's one in Haaretz. Anti-Semites are rejoicing. U.S. Jewish groups slammed Trump's refusal to denounce white supremacists. Because the white supremacists, by the way, are also anti-Semitic. And then here's this one from Kyle Griffin. Morning Consult poll, support for the Affordable Care Act is at 62. That's 62%, opposed 24, a record level of support in the Morning Consult poll. The Affordable Care Act has seen a roughly 20-point increase in support since 2013. So Trump is trying to jam a Supreme Court nominee through who has opposed the Affordable Care Act. Biden is making that a centerpiece of opposing Amy Coney Barrett. He now has the ability, Biden does, to also, through the Senate Democrats, make it a point of how are you going to decide this election if you get all of these, these ballots should be thrown out stuff. Wow. What are you going to do if Pennsylvania or Georgia says the Republican legislature says that they want to appoint their own electors? How do you feel about cases like that? I mean, there's a lot of information there that she's going to get hit on. And, she might do the usual Supreme Court avoidance. I believe in precedent, and that's the only thing I'm going to say about anything you ask me.
Right. I can't comment on hypotheticals.
But, before an election, she's not the one that's on the ballot. It's all the Republican senators who are going to vote for her. And you better damn well believe that this is going to be a campaign issue. That's why all this money is being raised. So, all of it together as a big picture thing is quite simply not helping Donald Trump get reelected. And so, that's where you get the makings of a blow-up. The big things, like Trump not being qualified, the little things, like the whistle-stop tours in the small towns so that Biden can, erode some of Trump's rural support, the middle things, like the Republican senators running away from condemning Trump about his Proud Boys stuff. You put it all together, it's a really, really bad situation for the Republicans.
That's good. They're really, really bad people.
They are. Kevin Robillard tweets, here's a good summary of how rough the political environment is for Republicans right now. Multiple GOP strategists tell me today that Jamie Harrison's chances of winning South Carolina are about equal to John James' chances of winning in Michigan. Harrison is a Democrat in South Carolina, and John James is the Republican in Michigan. And in Michigan, it's a closer race than we would like to see, but that's also true in South Carolina.
All right. Well, I'm not looking to trade them, but I'll take two pick'ems. Thanks.
One of the things you have to remember is Republicans, strategists try to put things in the best possible light. And if that's the best possible light they can come up with, that's not so good.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's good that it's not so good.
Right. When we get back after the break,
yes,
we're going to talk a little bit, or I am going to talk a little bit.
Go ahead.
I'm going to talk over you a little bit about Chuck Schumer and the Senate in terms of cloture today, and the House and trying to get through maybe a possible deal with Stephen Mnuchin on COVID relief.
Okay, right. Well, we are past the deadline. I forgot to mention that since it's October 1st, the government funding deadline did pass. And we actually shut down the government for about an hour yesterday. You mentioned that the president was dithering in Minnesota, and he was late in getting back, and the government shut down while he was gone, and then he reopened it again by signing the bill at the last possible minute. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. And send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're still with Greg Dworkin. Yes, the plan was for you to speak over me for the next segment. And yes, and I ought to correct myself. It was the president signed the continuing resolution well past the last possible minute. We did actually have a technical shutdown. I don't think it actually does anything. Everyone was probably asleep. But once again, something you don't really want to miss the mark on. But he skipped it for a rally and fundraiser. So, that's Trump for you.
Right. And just to throw in another poll for you, which is kind of interesting. This is the USC Dornsife poll, not of the presidential, but of the generic ballot in terms of Congress. On September 25th, this particular poll had the generic ballot at 6, which is okay. On September 27th, it was 7, which is a little bit stronger. And as of the last 2 days, it was 7 yesterday, and it's 8 today. So the generic ballot is climbing in terms of the Democrats' favor, which is always a good thing. Zach Cohen reports and we talked about this on the show yesterday, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer at 1 p.m. will force a vote on one-line legislation barring the Justice Department from seeking the invalidation of any part of the Affordable Care Act, including in its current suit to do so. So he's trying to kick the Department of Justice out of Trump's scheme to take your health care away. Yes. This is S4653 for those of you who follow along with your scorecards at home.
Bingo.
And Schumer on MSNBC last night on the
Bingos.
rare procedural move. We'll see where the Republicans stand. They'll all say, oh, yeah, I'm for protecting pre-existing conditions. They'll have a chance to show it tomorrow. Let's see what they do. So that vote is at 1 p.m. So, again, the whole purpose of that is just to get him on the record.
Okay.
Whoever your Republican senator is. Meanwhile, Jake Sherman writes on the House side, before I leave for the Capitol this morning, I wanted to point out a few things in Playbook, I guess his leaving. Today's a big day in Speaker Pelosi and Stephen Mnuchin's seemingly endless quest to inject more than $1 trillion of fresh money into the economy. Pelosi and Mnuchin met for an hour and a half Wednesday afternoon to try to reach an agreement and found many areas that needed work. Here's what our sources told us remain open. State and local funding. It's long an issue. The Democrats want $500 billion and Republicans are near $250 billion. Sounds like they can split the difference there. K through 12, $225 billion for Democrats, $150 billion for Republicans. Sounds like they can split the difference there too. A host of tax provisions, some related to health care, and probably trying to sneak in a few things for Ivanka to get rich. I don't think they can split the difference on that, but they might do it and then howl about it later. These things happen in Washington. Republicans tell us the deal needs to be less than $2 trillion for it to pass muster, and the Democrats want a deal at $2 trillion plus. So that's the first issue. There aren't firm demands, just general feeling. And even if it's at $1.6 trillion, which is Mnuchin offer, it faces an incredibly treacherous path in the GOP Senate. So to make a long tweet storm short, there are three players here: the White House, Pelosi, and McConnell. Now, Pelosi made a calculation a few months ago. The Trump administration was going to come back to the table to negotiate with her on COVID relief if she just waited long enough. Some Democrats thought she should buckle and take offers for less than $2 trillion. She didn't. Talks broke down. Pelosi moved from 3.4 to 2.4, and here we are, with talks restarted and the White House back at the table, showing its eagerness to cut a deal. Or as he said the other day, this was Pelosi doing what Pelosi does, which he'll get to in this tweet storm here. Now, here's a reality that's quite clear for Pelosi in the House. Biden's the favorite to win the White House. We were just talking about that. And a better deal isn't far around the corner if this falls apart. So she's in a win-win situation in terms of the actual legislation. Skip the moment for the moment that people need this yesterday.
Yeah, right. You just around the corner,
Just look at
it's
the
4
politics
months. Right. But
when Pelosi delayed the vote on her Democratic COVID relief bill Wednesday, her leadership team saw it as the speaker giving this one last chance while Mnuchin was serious and while Mark Meadows was out of the room. Because nobody could deal with Meadows. Meadows doesn't make deals.
No.
It seems as if Democrats will give the talks a few hours. If they fail, they'll move to their bill and move on. It would be very hard at this point for Republicans to say with a straight face Pelosi doesn't want a deal, given her eagerness at the moment. But, man, if she gets a deal, this Congress will be bookended by Pelosi owning the White House, besting Donald Trump in the shutdown in 2019, and now this. And Pelosi and Mnuchin wants a deal. Everybody who interacts with him understands that. The problem is McConnell. McConnell is not going to put a bill on the floor that doesn't command the support of a majority of Senate Republicans. So don't assume if Trump says jump, McConnell asks him how high. If Pelosi and Mnuchin come up with a deal, it's not necessarily okay with McConnell. McConnell's saying everybody's very far apart. So if a deal comes together, it'll take another week or more to see any action. If Pelosi sees a deal's in the offing, she'll go for it and make it happen. And if not, talks will peter out until after the election. So this is the last chance. I'm reading this as saying, look, Mnuchin and Pelosi could deal, and Pelosi can get more of what she otherwise would have had she cut a deal earlier. So in that sense, she's doing the right thing. Again, putting aside the fact that people need this yesterday. Yeah. And McConnell is the one who's going to say, no, it won't happen. And he's, in my view, going to lose the Senate over this. So I see the Democrats as being in a pretty strong position here politically to push what they want. It doesn't mean they'll get everything they want. But people who are saying Pelosi's playing this wrong were, once again, wrong.
But the Iraq War was great.
Maybe.
Or
but,
okay.
The analysis of the Iraq War was even better than the war,
It was truly special. Okay.
Truly special. So that's what's going on in your Congress.
Mine.
With your representatives and senators.
My Congress. Yes.
And so, really, honestly, folks, the only way to get this done better is to get rid of the Republicans. So that's where the voting comes in.
All right. We'll do it. Millions feel the same way. We can take care of this. All right. Well, let's see.
There's about 2 million people that have voted already.
Yeah, that's true.
That's just an astounding statistic comparing it to 2016 when it was in the handful of thousands.
Yeah, lots coming in. I saw briefly that the president is yelling about some number of them in New York getting invalid ballots. I don't know exactly what he's going on about, but he seems perturbed. So situation
New York
normal.
State sent screwed up ballots to people.
Yes.
So now they're going to have to recall them and send out real ones.
Yeah, and he seems
and he thinks
disturbed.
that's all part of voter fraud for some reason.
That people will just keep the original ones and vote twice. But
or something.
He says he's screaming, "What happens to the first ones?" And the answer is, if they show up at a polling place, they get thrown out.
Get counted.
That's what happens.
that's
I can't count this ballot. It's not a real ballot. Oh. Right. Wow.
So meanwhile, the pandemic is still going on. Warren Weber over at Huffington Post writes, as real Donald Trump and VP attend public rallies for going mask, the White House is sending weekly memos to governors encouraging them to implement mask mandates and even fines. Welcome to mask hypocrisy.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
In reports quietly issued to governors on September 20th, the White House Coronavirus Task Force recommended statewide mask mandates for Iowa, Missouri, and Oklahoma. The weekly memos have even encouraged doling out fines in Alaska, Idaho, and recently Montana. The mixed messages and ensuing confusion leave governors and often state and local health officials holding the bag of political consequences. 6 days before the White House Task Force recommended fines for those that don't follow mask rules in Montana, the vice president attended a rally where many didn't wear masks.
Yeah, did he? I don't know. Should we fine him?
So far, 16 states have yet to enact mask mandates for the general public. All of them are run by Republican governors, and 3 out of 4 Americans support enacting these laws. At some point, we have to turn the corner on this ridiculous separation of what we're being told is best practice and being guided by science and data, and what the actual practices are by the people who issue them, said Lori Freeman from NACHO. That's the National Association of Health Officials.
Yes.
County and health officials.
Yes.
One of the many failures of this administration is the politicization of masks, and this has really cost lives, said Tom Frieden, who used to run the CDC. There's no reason masks should be partisan. So, again, this is all in the background. The major reason Trump is losing the election, the pandemic is actually starting to flare up this fall. It'll get worse as things get colder and people move indoors. And while Trump is still trying to put the picture together of where we have everything under control and things are getting better, the opposite is in fact true. People know that. The public knows that. The voting public knows that. And it's among his many fails and one of the reasons I'm pretty confident he's going to wind up losing.
Yeah. Well, the mixed messaging isn't helping anybody. One of the first things we learned about handling messaging in a pandemic was that messaging had to be clear and consistent.
And transparent.
Right? That
and
wasn't
honest.
Happen.
You got to tell the truth.
Yeah. That's true too. I mean, you could be clear and consistent and dishonest. That is possible. But yeah, you're not supposed to do that. People will find out. And the mask thing in particular. My guess is here. I mean, Trump is still so adamant in public about belittling mask wearing that it seems clear that the strategy there is, well, we'll issue these memos. No one will take them seriously, but when Democrats accuse us of not doing the right thing, we'll point and say, look, the record is replete with our demands for masking mandates, as though no one will remember the president himself doing the opposite. But they have a real thing going on there in Missouri with a governor who's positive and has been, the story this morning I saw just before the announcement of their positive status, letting everybody know that he visited 2 veterans' homes beforehand. And one thing has nothing to do with the other. At the first one, no. At the second one, yes. But, the governor's mansion there, the spokespeople helpfully pointing out that one thing has nothing to do with the other, somehow.
Yes, of course. One thing has nothing to do with the other.
Right.
Actually, probably a more pertinent story would have been, didn't happen, but it could have happened, is for the governor's spokesperson to be unavailable because they were out sick.
It could be the case. I don't know. Maybe they replaced the person. They didn't tell anybody. They're not transparent down there.
Right.
But they also are just a few days from a big holiday party at the governor's
Right,
mansion.
which they're encouraging everybody to go to.
Yes.
So added
So
today
fun.
at 5:38 in polling, U.S. Senator. This is a Trafalgar group, so remember to add 5.
Oh.
Gary Peters over John James by 1 point, according to this poll,
That's
which
6.
really means it's 6.
Excellent.
In South Carolina, data for progress says Lindsey Graham is leading Jamie Harrison by 1 point. And again, the thing that the Republican consultant said in this particular poll, if you just take it at face value and don't play with adding 5 to Trafalgar, which, by the way, you should, said the narrator, Peters is up by 1 and Graham is up by 1 in South Carolina. So for them to make an equivalency between the two Senate races in their mind, you can see how that could happen. They're not really equivalent because actually Gary Peters is in a stronger position than Lindsey Graham is, oddly enough. But there you have it. In Maine, data for progress has Sarah Gideon over Susan Collins by 8 points. In Iowa,
Deeply concerned.
data for progress has Greenfield up by 2 over Ernst.
All right.
And in Arizona has Kelly up by 9. So the Senate is still looking pretty good. They don't have Tom Tillis, Cal Cunningham, but Cunningham has been running a fairly reasonable lead over Tillis. So Arizona, Colorado, where Hickenlooper is leading over Cory Gardner, North Carolina, and Maine make 4, and you need 5 because Alabama's always tricky for Doug Jones.
Right.
And so you have all these other races, including Lindsey Graham's, that definitely, absolutely, positively in the news yesterday. GBAO found that Barbara Bollier had a 2-point lead over Marshall in Kansas. Other polls show Marshall with a lead, but that's a race also to keep an eye on. And, of course, we have all the other ones under the radar, like Al Gross. On this show, I keep calling him Al Green, the singer.
Oh.
Al Gross, the doctor, the bear doctor up in Alaska, who has a pretty good shot at knocking off Sullivan, the Republican. So, again, the Senate is a little bit under the radar now because of the debates and having the presidential race in focus, but it's still awfully, awfully important.
No, you mentioned Tom Tillis. I can't remember exactly what the the situation was, but I did read briefly this morning that Tom Tillis was offering up an amendment that he thought was awfully important to whatever they were working on in the Senate the other day. And Ted Cruz, every senator's favorite senator, stepped in to block it. So he's got a crucial race going on there. I'm sure he thought he could score some points in the last couple weeks of the election with being an effective legislator in Washington, and Ted Cruz took a dump on him. So way to go, Ted.
Yeah. Did I ever mention that, nobody likes Ted Cruz?
You should. You want to do that now?
Yeah, I don't even think he could get a sufficient second.
No, not from Tom Tillis anyway, not this time. So
Nope.
he wasn't getting it before anyway. So
all right. One of the stories I dropped in the list for you to take a look at, and I'll probably be done in just a few minutes. That's my summary. But which I think is important, Mike Giglio wrote in The Atlantic, a pro-Trump militant group, and this is the Oath Keepers in this case, has recruited thousands of police soldiers and veterans. An Atlantic investigation reveals who they are and what they might do on Election Day. And it's a whole story about putting these things together to try to recruit like-minded people to be those poll watchers and other things that folks have talked about.
Yes.
But, of course, the head of the group, you'll be interested to note, is I hope he has insurance because it seems like he gets injured a whole lot.
Oh?
Yeah. For example, this is the head of the group, whose name is Rhodes, and his name is Stuart Rhodes, and he was a little-known libertarian blogger when he launched the Oath Keepers in early 2009, Great Recession, and of course, you know what happened in 2008. We had an election.
Yeah, and then he had to keep some oaths and something.
And something the black guy got elected.
Yeah. So
our would-be slave masters are greatly underestimating the resolve of the military capability of people, said Rhodes. Wow. He joined the military just out of high school, hoping to become a Green Beret, but his career was cut short when he fractured his spine during a parachute training jump.
How?
After his discharge, he worked as a firearms instructor until he dropped a loaded handgun and shot him in the face.
Did it really?
Yeah.
I was
blinding
kidding.
him in his left eye. That's one of the reasons why he wears an eye patch. I mean, I thought you might find that interesting.
Yes, that's the word.
Death inspired him at 28 to enroll in community college, became a lawyer,
That's good.
and then put together the Oath Keepers and keeps the nature ambiguous. The group is originally nonpartisan, was not, at a later post that the blog put it, a militia per se.
Nice.
We have these arguments about militias. J.J. McNabb likes to call them militia-like groups because she says to say militia sounds like they have structure, training, and discipline.
I guess that's true. Although
They act like a militia, but they're not a militia because often they don't have leadership and there is no structure and their training is terrible.
Yeah, well, okay. We got to come up with another word for that. I mean, maybe
So, I've been
militia-like
calling
isn't
them
the right word.
vigilantes because that's how they act. But militia-like is pretty good. We don't ask current serving law enforcement and military
Militia-light.
to sign up on any kind of membership list. We think that'd be foolish, but eventually he did create such a list. Collected members' names, home and email addresses, phone numbers, service histories, along with answers to a question about how they could help the Oath Keepers.
Shooting yourself in the face.
And last year, the Southern Poverty Law Center passed the entries for nearly 25,000 people belong to the author of this article.
Okay.
Right? It's a lot of people.
It is.
So he's got a law degree, and he does this.
You're right. Shoots himself in the face.
It happens.
Other things, yeah. Well, it happens. If you've got a gun and you drop it, I guess
Right?
it's among the
Rhodes
things
was
that
deeply
happens.
affected by Waco, Texas, which ended in the deaths of more than 70 members of an armed Christian sect, which to him showed the danger of government power, but the Patriot movement became notorious for its connections to white nationalists and fell apart after Timothy McVeigh, and he wanted to avoid repeating these earlier groups' mistakes. So
He shot himself in the face.
Rhodes wrote a creed listing 10 types of orders that members vow to resist. Gun control laws,
I see.
libertarian concerns such as subjecting American citizens to military tribunals and warrantless search and seizure, blockades of
Interesting.
cities, foreign troops on U.S. soil, like, Red Dawn or something,
Okay.
putting Americans in detention camps. And here Rhodes was
Hey.
drawing from the New World Order theory, a worldview central to Patriot movement that can be traced back to what historian Richard Hofstadter, writing in the 60s, called the paranoid style in American politics, linking fears of globalism, a deep distrust of elites, and the idea that a ballooning federal government could become tyrannical.
Oh, no.
Okay, and then he started making the rounds, became famous, and has been recruiting people, and, just sort of an interesting article about where the origins of all this stuff comes from.
Right. Well, just a few inches away from avoiding all of that at one point, but
Right? The author asked whether the Oath Keepers were white nationalists. The group had participated in events with the Proud Boys, a group of self-described, quote, Western chauvinists, and provide security at so-called free speech rallies headed by alt-right activist Kyle Chapman. We're not frickin' white nationalists, Rhodes said, pointing out that the Oath Keepers have disavowed the Proud Boys and their vice president is black. That's the new smear. Everybody on the right is a white nationalist. When you have that drumbeat of demonization, then what are we supposed to think?
yeah,
We're
what are we
supposed to think you guys are
think?
white nationalists is what we're supposed to
Yeah, well, either that or, I mean, it could be that you are an integrated group of idiots.
Yeah, Rhodes relentlessly demonizes Black Lives Matter as Marxists, a foreign
Yeah, sure.
enemy, a foreign
is
emphasis on
perfectly
foreign, right?
Yeah.
And he dwells on imagined threats from undocumented immigrants and Muslims that fit his ideas about a globalist push to undermine Western values. You see, they're not white nationalists, they're anti-globalists. See,
Right.
that explains everything. They're not anti-Semitic, they're just anti-globalists.
Right. That's all it is. All right. Well, all we have to do is resist all of that, and also, I hate when they call us white nationalists. Those stupid Marxists.
Right. But behind the scenes, Karaman, one of the other leaders there, and others who were close to Rhodes told me the Oath Keepers were plagued by dysfunction. That's what you mean about militia light or
yes.
militia-like. Rhodes would disappear for long stretches and stall on initiatives. That would have been a boon to recruiting. But then we have Donald Trump. See, that's the problem. And so that's where things start to get bad.
Yeah. All right. Well, these.
Right. So it's a good origin piece. I'm still not sure what they're going to do. When the protests erupted in Kenosha a month later, many of the demonstrators brought guns. Vigilante groups quickly formed on the other side. They called themselves the Kenosha Guard. There was a confrontation near a gas station, and a teenager allegedly opened fire and killed 2 people. A man affiliated with Antifa allegedly gunned down a Trump supporter in Portland, and Rhodes declared the first shot has been fired.
Oh,
By then, some writers popular in the militant right have been warning that wars don't always start with a clear, decisive event, an attack, a coup, an invasion. You might not realize you're in one till it's underway, and the path to it might begin with brooding over it, and it could start with opening your mind. So it's a background story for the frightening prospect of realizing that really the discussion from this point forward shouldn't be complacency, but it's really not so much about Trump winning or losing the election. He's going to lose. It's what Joe Biden said at the debate, which was one of the two important things that happened at that debate. We already covered one of them. Everybody has, about Trump refusing to disavow from the Proud Boys. And people are giving Chris Wallace credit for putting that in, but it wasn't. It was Joe Biden.
Right. Yes.
If you go back and look at the transcript or look at the actual tape of what happened, Chris Wallace was pressing Donald Trump to generically disavow white nationalism. And Trump challenged him and said, who are you talking about? What kind of people are you talking about? And Biden said, Proud Boys. And Trump picked up on that and said, Proud Boys, they have to stand back and, stand by. So it was Biden who injected that, and Trump immediately knew who they were and then jumped on that. And that's what happened. So that was obviously one of the important things, and we talked about the fallout from that. But the other important thing was Biden speaking directly to the public, directly to the camera, and saying, look, you guys have to vote. When you vote and he loses, he's done. He's out. He can't stay. All this stuff is nonsense about him hanging around afterwards. It's finished. It's over. He loses, he's done. He's leaving. Those weren't his exact words, but that's a paraphrase. And that was good, and it was powerful, and it was correct. And the reason it was so important is because what Trump is trying to do is confuse you into thinking it won't be over, it'll be confusing, and then we have all these people here trying to just set the record straight, good people on both sides, yada, yada, yada. No, you're done, you're out.
The way it used to be in America.
The way it's always been.
Yeah. All right. Well,
and the way it's going to be, which is the important thing here.
I hope so. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird thing. I guess part of the new White House position on things is that he has corrected himself and said the right thing, and he also doesn't know who the Proud Boys are and never did, but was very quick to say the wrong thing about
Max Boot, one of the Never Trumpers who remained a Never Trumper, and there are plenty of those, actually made a good point and said, you know what, in the next debate, somebody needs to ask Trump to disavow QAnon.
Oh, yeah, right. That'd be a good one, too.
Well, he doesn't want to. Just like he doesn't want to do the Proud Boys, he doesn't want to disavow anybody who votes for him because he knows he's losing and he needs every single vote.
Yeah.
So put him on the spot.
Right.
And, I'm telling you, if the moderator doesn't bring it up and nobody in the town hall brings it up, Biden will bring it up.
He's going to be there, so he has the opportunity to do it. Yes. And it's always interesting to hear him say, I don't like to criticize people who say nice things about me. And then you say, I thought you didn't know who they were. Well, I know that. I know that part. They say nice things. So
I don't like to criticize people who I don't know who they are that like me.
It has to be done in a in a particular manner. By the way, it's if you just jump on and pile on and say, well, how about QAnon and disavowing them? You'll say, now you're saying they're white nationalists. Now many of them are. Many of them are and don't know it. Many of them are and do know it. Many of them aren't, actually, as it turns out, but lend aid and comfort to those driving the movement who are. But, they'll try and conflate that with accusations that everybody who has questions about the deep state or...
Right. You also have to be, much clearer in the questions you're asking. For example, it's crazy to keep asking Trump. He's been asked this 500 times. Will you accept the results of the election? Yeah. That's not the question. The question is, what are you going to do if you lose?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
If you lose, what are you going to do?
I won't lose.
Let's posit. Let's state as a premise you've lost.
Yeah, he won't even go in
now
with
what?
That. I don't even understand
don't
what
give me
that
this.
means.
Well, I'm not going to lose. Or don't give me this. Well, we don't know if I've lost. If you lose, cut all that crap out because you'll just dance around that for an hour if we let you. If you lose, then what are you going to do?
He might not answer it, but it will still be revealing, and that he'll continue to insist. The only way I'll lose is if there's something wrong, which is why I won't accept the results, which is what he's been saying all along. But it's clarifying. But I don't know
remember, we're not Donald Trump.
Questions.
Okay, the purpose of asking these questions is to clarify things. It's not to break him. Well, that won't break him, so why would you ask him?
Well, I would
That's
like
not
to break
why
him.
you ask questions. He thinks it is. That's what he wanted to do with Joe Biden, and I am more convinced than ever. And in fact, there was I can't find it now, but somebody had actually quoted a month ago piece from Politico, where some insider telling Politico, the playbook or whatever, that what Trump wants to do is use specific key words to see if he can get Biden to stutter and make him hesitate and make him break his train of thought and make him look like he's senile.
Oh.
And that was the plan. And it was the plan a month ago.
It was all riding
I said on
that.
the show the other day, that's what he was doing. He was trying to press Biden into making him stutter. And in fact, yes, that's exactly what it was. That's not what we're doing when we ask Trump questions.
Yeah, that's
we're not trying
true.
to make him go psychotic or have a stroke. We want it to be clarifying so voters can have a choice about what to do and they can see who he is.
Yes. Although, if you told me there was a keyword that would give him a stroke, I would try it.
Well, it's a bonus, but that's not, that's not the main
It doesn't work that way. So, yeah. All right. Well, that is interesting. Was that what you were trying to find this morning and when your auto refresh killed you?
Yes.
Damn it. Now I want that
on
too.
Twitter, and I had it right there. Boom. All of a sudden it's gone because it auto-refreshed. And now I have the latest quote, and I don't know what happened to the one that I was looking at.
All right. Well, if you happen to find it, send it along because that is interesting. Because I know you posited that yesterday, and I figured you must have read it somewhere. And
I did today.
Oh. It just hadn't happened yet. Okay.
It just seemed like that's what was going on. And then
it's
I
a
get
good
this
guess.
confirmation this morning that, you know what, that's what was going on.
Well, I'm as interested in that as anything on this show when we find out that our suppositions and speculations are backed up. Either I want to find out that people who are writing these articles are listening to the show, or we're on the right track.
Listen
either
to
one.
The show a month in advance.
I'll take
really
either
good.
one. This show is always a month in advance. It's fantastic. And I've got, there was something that happened today. I'll try and think of it during this break. Thanks, Greg. I
All right,
appreciate
see
it.
you
We'll
Monday.
see you next week. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And we very often neglect to say, I guess technically we're on Daily Coast Radio as well, which is not really a thing quite yet, but, we've always hoped it would be. And we would expand our radio and podcasting lineup, and maybe. Slowly, it continues to happen. And but we're not a cohesive network. We're not. We're like Antifa, I guess, in that respect. But Netroots Radio is a real thing, and you can tune into it all day long. So that's easy enough to explain why emphasize Netroots Radio over Daily Coast Radio. Well, one's real and one's not quite there yet, and we get lots of help and support from all the people who put together the daily lineup at Netroots Radio, a real thing that you can listen to podcasts to all day long and stay tuned and just have them switch you from one to the other. I recommend it daily. Are you doing it? That's the question. You might as well. It's that time, and your interest in all things political will be heightened. It looks like Greg found the thing he was thinking about. And so have I. So here's Greg has sent us from Politico the proof that his speculation was correct, or at least evidence that tends to prove that his speculation was correct. Trump team plots how to bust Biden in the debates. And they wrote that headline that way on purpose to see if they could get people to stutter it, I guess, with a little extra alliteration. The president's advisors are studying Biden's idiosyncrasies to identify ways to trip him up on the debate stage. This was from early September 4th. Nancy Cook and Gabby Orr writing again for Politico. So we run through it. During the 2016 presidential campaign, then candidate Donald Trump blew off his first round of debate prep. He refused to do a mock debate with a fake lectern and didn't want any single person to play Hillary Clinton and wouldn't simulate the parrying of questions between the moderator and candidates. Prep sessions took the form of a roundtable discussion with a motley crew of advisors, including Mike Flynn, the notorious spy, then New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, Fox News host Laura Ingraham, Steve Bannon, right mid-face melt, I think, Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, who are very helpful with almost everything, I'm sure, and multiple aides posing questions to Trump. The process was a total you-know-what show, the same kind of show we saw at the debate the other night. That's what Christie later wrote in his book. It's amazing how many times with reference to Trump that word or compound word, let's say, is getting used. So let's see. He later wrote it in his book, and do you care what the title of his book is? You shouldn't, but it is interesting in the people he takes a shot at. The book is called Let Me Finish: Trump, the Kushners, Bannon, New Jersey, and the Power of In-Your-Face Politics, which is kind of funny because there's some power, I guess, in being in your face in your book subtitle, too. You don't really want to put people like the Kushners and Bannon in there. Trump maybe might sell some books, and, of course, conceding that will only make him feel better about himself. So screw that. All right. Trump will largely viewed his first debate against Clinton as a losing performance. Now the Trump campaign and top advisors want to avoid the same misstep this fall when the president first faces off against Biden. The Trump team has been studying Biden's idiosyncrasies, preparing tactics, according to interviews with a dozen campaign aides, White House officials, and outside advisors. Some have noticed the way he says, "Come on, man," whenever he feels frustrated. And they're trying to identify words or phrases that trigger him to reboot, as one person familiar with the planning described it. Essentially, Trump aides are looking for ways to trip up Biden in an effort to spur an incoherent or unsatisfactory response, bolstering a key Trump argument against Biden built around his age, which I guess is plan B if you can't make your candidate say something that's a winner. You can always try to put all your effort into trying to force the other candidate to say something that's a loser. But then, of course, if you don't do that and you haven't scored your points, it's a double loss. That's what they got. Biden did a very effective job at debating Paul Ryan. So, they were worried about that. Biden certainly has tells when he's not telling the truth. That's what they thought. And those are things that I've picked up in my review of his debates over the years. Said Jason Miller, who's a disgusting pervert. And he's also a senior advisor to the campaign, probably largely because of his disgusting pervertedness. And one of the key advisors on the debates. Biden has been debating for half a century. He's very good. Part of the reason he is very good is he gives the same answers over and over to questions for the last 30 years. But he does have certain tells that he uses when he's not confident in his answer or trying to change the subject or make viewers forget what the actual question is. I think everybody's got that. We know what Trump's are. I mean, you do know by now. Like whenever he says, take a look at, or if you look at, the look at thing, well, everyone knows about the sir stories, of course. The sir story is an automatic lie, a fabrication. But take a look at, if you look at. Those are Trump crutches for, I don't remember where this information came from, and I'm not even sure what the information was. I have a few keywords dancing around in my head. I can kind of put it together so that you might be able to figure out. Daniel Dale might be able to find what I was referring to and explain why I got the whole thing wrong. But if he hears in conversation, sees on Fox TV, or picks up on Twitter that something detrimental to his cause has happened or something he considers an outrage, he'll remember some key, I can't say facts, but words about it. And then he'll blurt something out about it. And if you push him on it, he can't muster those facts or isn't sure of himself. And so he just says, essentially he says, look for yourself. Go find the information. You're asking him for the facts and he's saying, go find it yourself. And his phrasing for it is, if you take a look at this, if you look at what's happening here, or, look at this city, look at that city, look at the other city, all Democrat cities. And so he just says that thing. That's his scattershot technique that's supposed to send fact checkers scrambling. But like I say, to me, I think it's pretty obvious. The tell for that is the look at phrasing. and see if that doesn't comport with your understanding of what he's doing when you hear him say it again. He does it almost daily. All right. Well, anyway, so they thought Biden had certain tells. Quietly, Trump aides and advisors began to discuss debate prep in early August, where at the golf resort in Bedminster, of course. Prep work is expected to ramp up considerably now that the Republican National Convention has concluded, but it didn't because they were idiots. They thought Trump would work harder on something, and he's not going to do that. Then you can see the rest of the article is not worth reading because the next line is, polls show the presidential race tightening, which it isn't. Particularly in battleground states like North Carolina, Michigan, and Wisconsin, the debate offers an opportunity for Trump to show off the power of incumbency, blah, 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 yada, yada. He didn't do any of those things. Biden is a much different politician from Clinton, and preparing to debate him involves its own set of challenges, especially since Trump must prepare and serve as president at the same time. Well, he wasn't going to be wasting any time serving as president. Again, don't know what they were thinking of when they wrote this up. Biden doesn't carry the same political baggage or raw hatred from conservatives that the Clintons did, and he speaks in a more folksy and conversational manner compared with other politicians. Let's see, anything else worth mining out of here? Yeah, not there. Debates are about practice, blah, 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 says Ed Rollins. Well, he's not going to do that. Trump team has been trying to do many of the sessions outside the White House, which is a good idea, and views Bedminster as a relaxing place, free of distractions, like the West Wing or the residence. But it's really not because it's a golf course, and he's rather play golf than prepare. So he went and did that, and he didn't prepare, and it showed. All right. Well, at any rate, I don't know if it says anywhere in here specifically, well, what we're trying to do is trigger a stutter. But they certainly thought that they were the reset, I think, is their way of saying it euphemistically. And, well, it didn't work. So I guess we're done with that segment. Thing that I had mentioned on our way out for see your excerpt. Oh, okay. Thank you, Greg. No wonder, Greg. He sends me these links. And then there's all these other words and stuff. And I'm like, what are all these words? Oh, it's the part you wanted me to read. Okay. There's some tension among the president's advisors over whether it was wise to try to trip up Biden so he stutters or to box him in on issues. There we go. One 2016 campaign. See, I saw that in the scan, and I said, I don't want to go back to the 2016. One 2016 Trump campaign official said, it's a calculated risk to phrase things in such a way that might cause the former vice president to stammer in his response, acknowledging such a strategy could backfire if Trump deliberately appears to be messing with Biden's history of stuttering, an attribute Biden has used to demonstrate his ability to overcome challenges and his empathy for our children in other similar situations. One aide said Biden is a good debater and unlikely to have difficulty speaking in that environment, and they should have listened to that guy. The reboot part, yes, I picked up on that, and I understood what that meant. That sort of felt like code, though. But here, at least, there's a overt mention of stuttering, and I wonder what they thought exactly they were going to be able to do. Like, I was thinking, like, well, they never, at what point did they ever try to make him say something? The only thing he tried to force him to say is, say that you endorse law and order. But law and order is an easy phrase and not likely to trigger anything. But I mean, maybe they don't want to make it too obvious. Like, oh, well, how come you won't endorse Peter Piper's picking of a peck of pickled peppers? And I don't know if that's really going to set off anybody's stutter or anything. But if it was quite that obvious, then I suppose it could backfire. I wonder what they thought they had mined out and whether... There's an interesting question. Did they really discover something that was a genuine trigger, but they couldn't get Trump to remember it and perform? That's a distinct possibility. Trump is terrible at such things. And it might be that, he came off the stage and people were like, you never said this, what, why didn't you do it? I didn't remember. I can't, it's a stupid thing anyway. I don't know. Or it might just be like these other advisors at the end say, nah, in a debate setting, he's just not, there's no triggering him. He's just, he's well practiced. It's not going to work. And of course, I did see discussion out there after I heard Greg's speculation about it, and I figured it must have come from somewhere, because I did see other people saying, if they were trying to get him to stutter during the debate, I too overcame a stutter. And the people, of course, who had overcome such a thing, or people who knew anybody who did, that they cared about, were outraged by this being the possibility. It's not a universal condition, and so it won't impact the race in that sort of way. But yeah, there are a lot of people who are just furious about the idea and just saying, really, to be making fun of him because of it. I mean, Republicans and Trump supporters, of course, don't care about anything. And even though many of them probably experienced the same problem or knew somebody in their family who did, they're putting that aside because I hate Joe Biden, Marxism, socialism, something. And it's easy. Trump is the only thing standing between us and an Antifa takeover of our country, plus Sharia. So I'll vote for, I guess there's no changing their minds. But a lot of people would have found that personally offensive, I'm sure. And of course, it was one of the great humanizing moments of the Democratic campaign, seeing that he, works with kids who stutter, like personally, and calls them on the phone and speaks with them from time to time to encourage them to work on the problem and overcome it. And trying to combat that, I don't think so. Anyway, I wouldn't recommend it. Certainly not for Trump, who's just liable to put his foot in his mouth at any given time on anything. So don't do it on anything sensitive. The story that I was trying to bring to mind toward the beginning of the break at the top of the hour, what thing was it that we spoke about recently that, again, snuck in just under the wire and on time? It was the time we spent on the HHS paid ad blitz to dispel despair over the coronavirus pandemic, and now we sat on that one for a little while. I'm glad I squeezed it in just under the wire, because the new reporting from Politico on this comes under the headline of HHS ad blitz sputters as celebrities back away. It was my guess, as we were reading the piece, that once it was exposed and was being dissected in the light of day, celebrities would be much more reluctant to participate. They might very well have had it sold to them as, you're doing a patriotic thing here. Everyone knows that there's despair as a result of our being forced to deal with the pandemic. And I'm sure that, I don't know what kind of guy Dennis Quaid really is. And Randy Quaid's a little cuckoo. They might have been able to get him to do it. But people were expressing surprise that he would have agreed to do this. But if it had been sold to you as, that there's a lot of depression and despair out there, we're going to do a public service message that tries to help people get through that. And you wouldn't necessarily think that there was anything wrong with it being paid for with government funds, except that, when a Trump is handling it, that there's going to be some unfair political advantage taken from it, including like a message at the end that says, I'm President Donald Trump, and I paid for this ad campaign to help you because you're an American and I love you. Or whatever. I don't know how they were going to capitalize on that. But it does remind me that, what did I see this morning? That somebody else was mentioning, I think I retweeted the thing. I'll have to comb through the retweets this morning, but that I guess they were, the Trump administration was essentially creating some sort of backlog. Here we are. Our friend Grudging One tweeted this one out, retweeted the tweet of Catherine Rampell from the Washington Post, letting everybody know that Trump requires food aid boxes during the pandemic and other disasters to come with a letter from him. The new mandate has sent food banks and other nonprofits scrambling as they worry distributing the boxes with the letters could be misconstrued as election activity. But of course, they probably also worry that distributing the boxes without the letters in order to avoid participating in election activity will result in Trump cutting off federal funds to those food aid distributors, or pressuring states who might be supporting them to stop supporting them because of the personal insult to him. Politico has this write-up as well. Let's see. In my 30 years of doing this work, I've never seen something this egregious, one food bank director said. We don't have to read you the entire piece. You get the idea. But the Agriculture Department last week began mandating that millions of boxes of surplus food for needy families include a letter from President Donald Trump claiming credit for the program. I grew these with my own tiny orange hands, he might say in it. USDA's $4 billion Farmers to Families food box program has distributed more than 100 million boxes to those in need since May, with the aim of redirecting meat, dairy, and produce that might normally go to restaurants and other food service businesses. But because coronavirus, it's not needed there. Organizations handing out the aid complain that the program is now being used to bolster Trump's image in a month before a high-stakes election, and some even have refused to distribute them. There's the comment about the 30 years. I've never seen anything this egregious. That was Lisa Hamler-Fugit, F-U-G-I-T-T, Executive Director of Ohio Association of Food Banks. These are federally purchased boxes. And now you're in trouble because he's going to be coming after the Ohio Association of Food Banks, which is fine. In the swing state, go for it. Let's see. So here's the letter. Dear family, whatever your name is, as president, safeguarding, should we do it in his voice? The health and well-being of our citizens is one of my highest priorities, except for golf. As a part of our response to the coronavirus, I prioritized sending nutritious food from our farmers to families in need throughout America. He didn't write this, so we shouldn't even bother doing it in his voice. He goes on to say, oh, by the way, you should also wash your hands. People who feel sick should stay home, protect the vulnerable individuals by including those over 80 years of age and those with pre-existing conditions, practice social distancing, consider wearing a face covering when in public. So you know he didn't write this thing. So there you go. They wanted that in the boxes. The letter comes in both English and Spanish, by the way. You should note that, as Trump denies that he'll do anything in Spanish because reasons. And the move is the latest example of Trump using the levers of government and taxpayer dollars for self-promotion as he runs for re-election. So, look, that's really what you need to know from that story. Jumping back to the HHS story, that looks like it's going down the tubes. They made a list of more than 30 celebrities, Dan Diamond reports, including Justin Timberlake, Taylor Swift, and Billy Joel, to appear in their ad campaign to inspire hope about the coronavirus, or despite, I would say, coronavirus. But they ended up with only Dennis Quaid, CeCe Winans, that's harsh, and Hasidic singer Shulam Lemmer. Okay, so that would have been exciting. The health department's $300 million plus taxpayer-funded vehicle to boost confidence in President Donald Trump's response to the pandemic is sputtering. So I guess, people are backing out of the project now that they're learning what it was really all about. I think you get the gist of it. As interesting as it would be to comb through the details just to find out if there was anything extra evil going on, I will move on to some other subjects, which we need to give some time to. Let's see. Here's an interesting internationally, some coronavirus news. And again, here we can limit it mostly to the headline. Reuters reporting Turkey, the country, Turkey has only been publishing symptomatic coronavirus cases, according to a minister in the government there. Let's see, where do they fall on the list? 18th in terms of the raw number of total cases. They report 318,663. Putting them in raw numbers, slightly above Turkey and slightly below Saudi Arabia. By population, they fall where? They're probably further down here. I'd just be curious to see. Anyway, so what they were doing as I scanned through and looked for them to appear in here. And I guess this is indicative of what they're doing is they fall below the international world average if they do this. They fall at 94th by population. There are 318,000 cases distributed among a population of over 84 million, you see. So well down the list in terms of population. But the reason is they've been manipulating the numbers, sort of. Turkey's health minister on Wednesday appeared to acknowledge that the government did not publish the full number of daily positive COVID-19 cases, but only those who are symptomatic, while refuting a claim that the case number had been 19 times the original figures. The official number of daily, coronavirus cases in Turkey have begun to decline in recent days after rising over the past several weeks. So it might be a new thing. So it might not have affected their total reporting numbers, but perhaps of late their new cases day to day has been lowered because they're just basically saying, if you have it but you're asymptomatic, we don't report it. What's the justification? During a weekly news conference, the minister said that the number of daily new COVID-19, quote, patients, which he defined as those who are symptomatic, was more important than the number of new cases, which includes those who do not show symptoms. And it is, there's an interesting distinction to be made, I suppose, especially if those who are, quote unquote, patients are hospital patients. So I wouldn't mind having a separate read on, well, how many of the people who are coming down with it, not necessarily on a daily basis, but who are coming down with the virus require hospitalization. So I can take a look at your hospital bed capacity reports versus the numbers of people you are having to have occupy those beds. Are you going to run out of hospital bed capacity? Would be a relevant question and reason for keeping separate numbers. But when the rest of the world is reporting test positives, you really need to do the same thing. So I don't know. Maybe it's not that they have 19 times the total cases that they've reported to date, but that over the last whatever period of time, they have been reporting only those with symptoms, and that has resulted in a number approximately 19 times lower than any other country would have reported under the same circumstances. I have been wondering whether the same thing is going on in response or with respect to the reporting of what we call, or I guess what Worldometers calls the category of active cases, which sounds like a very important and useful stat, but I don't think there's any single standard definition for what falls into active cases. My first thought would be if you get a positive test result and you haven't yet gotten a negative one, you're still infected with the virus at the moment, whether you're symptomatic or not, that feels like what I would think is an active case. I don't know how they define it, and I don't know if there's any medical standard on this. It might just be sort of a made-up statistic. And I think Florida and Texas in particular, and now a couple of other southern states where their governors are concerned with their numbers, are taking advantage of the fact that there's no standard definition, and they're just shaving, in some cases, thousands of people a day off of the rolls of active cases, because who can say whether they're active or not if there's no standard definition? You can't even challenge our definition. So Florida, for instance, was at the top of the list by far in the number of active cases. And as soon as they, I guess, found that out, and they weren't watching me report on it, but it must have struck them at some point, and they've just been chucking people off of it, maybe based on nothing, but at a remarkable rate, well beyond the range within which most other states change in either direction, positive or negative, from my observation. And then there are other states that might just not be interested in tracking active cases at all, but the category exists, and Worldometers has to do something to fill it. So they just say, well, when you have new cases reported, we'll add that to not only to your new case total and your total case total, but to your active case total as well, and they'll remain there until your state starts giving us numbers about people who have come off. But a lot of states are not that concerned with, well, I need to keep an eye on how I look statistically. We're more interested in, are you sick or are you not sick? And can we get you better, and can we keep you from spreading it to other people? So I think Virginia, among them, I've noticed, just not really reporting when people get better. And I never really understood exactly how they would even get that information. I don't think there's any requirement to report to the state, I feel better now, you can take me off your list. And so they don't. And so as the state's caseload grows, even as people do get better, they're just not removed from the active rolls. Anyway, so bad news about getting standards of reporting together, both internationally and domestically. And I guess authoritarian governments and wannabe authoritarians have no incentive to do that, and so they don't. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Plenty to catch up on still, and maybe we'll jump from story to story here, but we got to dive into the reading of some of these things. News on the Brad Parscale front of sorts. I did sort through this, a Vanity Fair piece from Gabriel Sherman, I think, who I usually enjoy reading through the details of the story. This one, a little bit scattered, but the headline grabbed me. The family is worried, that's Trump's family, worried that Brad, that's Parscale, will start talking. Trump world panics over debate fiasco as campaign turmoil mounts. Even the headline is disjointed, and this piece is really sort of a collection of a number of little undeveloped items that they threw together here. But the one that grabbed my attention is, I guess the Trump family is now worried that an involuntarily hospitalized Brad Parscale might start spilling the beans, whether about something else or about what. Well, what brings you here today, Brad? Well, I've been pressured to do things that are so horribly unethical that my brain just couldn't take it anymore, or what? Curious to know. And I guess the Trump family worried that he might tell. So something to keep an eye on as well. Let's see. Two other things that have been suggested to me as topics, which we will perhaps pick up on. And one other thing I happened to note yesterday, we have, I guess, some follow-up news on this. We wondered whether this would happen when we noted a couple days ago, I believe, on the show, that a federal judge had ordered the Commerce Department and Wilbur Ross as its head to continue with census taking well into, I think, late October, but that despite the order, Wilbur Ross was going to direct that operations wind up on October 5th. And we wondered, based on what authority, and why isn't the judge holding him in contempt of court for being in direct violation of this order? And the answer is the judge, I guess, hadn't gotten around to it yet, because Axios was reporting yesterday, judge suggests, anyway, contempt proceedings after Wilbur Ross defies order on census. A federal judge on Tuesday indicated she may move forward with contempt proceedings after Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross defied court orders to continue the 2020 census. Talking Points memo first reported, although I'm reading it in Axios. Driving the news, you know how Axios likes to put these things. Driving the news, Ross instructed the census to end its field operations October 5th, despite Judge Lucy Koh's, it's K-O-H, apostrophe S here, possessive. Lucy Koh is the one who has issued the preliminary injunction. That makes it Lucy Koh's preliminary injunction. Get it? In San Jose, California, last week, allowing the head count of every U.S. resident to continue through the end of October. Koh said Monday Ross was, quote, doing exactly, unquote, what she instructed the Trump administration not to in the order, per Bloomberg, and linking to their coverage of it. Koh's injunction suspended the Census Bureau's deadline for ending the once-in-a-decade count on September 30th, reimposing an older Census Bureau proposal to end the operations on October 31st, according to AP. They're really aggregating a lot here at Axios. The judge indicated she may look at other ways, though, to hold the government to account. You don't have to call it contempt, she said. You can call it something else, although I don't know why you wouldn't call it contempt. The Commerce Department made no immediate response, and it leaves you hanging at that. We're not sure whether he'll be held in contempt, but the judge is considering it, and I think the judge respectfully, ma'am, should get off her ass and make a decision about that, but I'm sure she's a very busy person, and the pace is a responsible one. I just am anxious to have the answer already. But that should have no legal bearing on things. So you go, Judge Koh, that rhymes, and get it right. Hope you do. All right. Other stories that have been suggested to me as interesting topics. And let's see if I can credit everyone correctly just by scrolling through Twitter here. I think I can do it pretty quickly. All right, let's see. Let's see. On my way down, I'll note that BJ Hutch, our Montreal girl, has tweeted to me a piece from the Toronto Star here. I'll just give you the headline. Canada has sent election observers to fragile democracies, in the past. Donald Trump's America should be on that list. I guess there's an opinion piece in the Star. That's some of some interest. And I've been wondering when we were going to maybe get UN peacekeepers if we can't keep our militia lights under control. But certainly worth looking into. I'd be curious to read through that one on the air, but I'm on track to get to something else here. Where have my suggestions come from? If I can't find it, I apologize. But let's see. I have had suggested to me, and some of them maybe came in email too. All right. Not immediately coming up. But one was, here we go. And it's Paula Ryder who has sent it to me. There it is, and it's over in my DMs. That's why. Seemed like an interesting article. And I think it got some mention yesterday, and maybe from, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe Greg brought it up. But there's a piece out there from Neil Buchanan, Michael Dorf, and Lawrence Tribe that argues, in the headline, no, Republicans cannot throw the presidential election into the House so that Trump wins. Although now I'm thinking that was maybe something that Joan brought up on Tuesday when we were discussing it. But this piece is dated yesterday, so she was on before this came up. But I think probably Tribe had been out there suggesting that maybe on Twitter earlier than he wrote it up for verdict at Justia or Justia.com, Justia. So throwing some cold water on the idea that Trump could force the election, a deadlocked election, into the House of Representatives. I haven't read it, and maybe we should, but I have a feeling I'm going to disagree, and that they might be coming down on, although there could be an interesting twist in here, they might be coming down on the position that, it shouldn't work under like regular law, but could it work under idiot law is the applicable question here. Let's see what they have to say and how long it is, and maybe we can give you some rundown of who's writing here. Lawrence Tribe, you've no doubt heard of before. He's more than Twitter famous. Michael Dorf, you probably have heard on once or twice because he writes had a blog that his name is actually Dorf, and he writes Dorf on Law, which is not, I don't think, certainly not, hasn't been prosecuted as a copyright violation by, who's the comedian who does the Dorf on Golf? Tim Conway, right? Is Tim Conway still alive? His estate could be doing it. I don't know. I haven't checked on him lately. Okay, well, sorry about that. And for big fans of Dorf that we have out there, whatever. Anyway, Neil Buchanan also joins in this one. He, too, a legal scholar and economist. University of, okay. Holds the, ready for the long title because it's a college, James J. Freeland Eminent Scholar Chair in Taxation at the University of Florida's Levin College of Law. It's like stadium naming rights. You got to go on for an extra 20 minutes. Okay, here's what they have to say. In a stunning public admission of a plan to distort our democracy, Donald Trump has been telling his audiences that he will win the 2020 election without winning more votes than Joe Biden. But unlike 2016, Trump's new plan is not even to win the Electoral College despite losing the popular vote. Instead, he thinks that the U.S. House of Representatives will hand him a second term. This strategy, and it's not a good one, by the way, is based on a misreading of the Constitution, these guys say. Trump could yet pull off an Electoral College victory, although that is looking increasingly unlikely. But his throw it into the House strategy simply won't work. Let's see. As undemocratic as the Electoral College is, it's important to emphasize that Trump's new strategy would represent an even more extreme rejection of the idea of government by the people. That I agree with. If the president were to be selected by the House under the relevant provisions that we described below, each state, no matter its population, would get exactly one vote. Agreed. Therefore, if the Republicans manage to maintain their current hold on 26 of the 50 delegations in the House, then the Republican minority in the People's House could hand Trump a second term no matter what the people or even the Electoral College says. Yes, so far that doesn't help your headline. Of course, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and her colleagues are wisely focused on winning the House seats necessary to flip that advantage, but the very idea that Trump's supposed ace in the hole is to engineer a vote that is completely divorced from majority rule tells us everything that we need to know about Republicans' willingness to hold on to power through whatever means necessary. It does. Now, as we explained below, however, even if every other part of Trump's scheme were to fall into place, the plain meaning of the constitutional text on which Trump relies would not, in fact, send the election to the House. Trump's plan, this section is titled, to contest certain states' results, deliberately creating chaos. We've heard the plan. Should we skip down to why it's not real? Trump's Hail Mary plan is based on the 12th Amendment to the Constitution, which adjusted the method for selecting the president and vice president to accommodate political parties, but retained the original Constitution's backup procedure for circumstances in which the Electoral College fails to produce a winner. With Trump's scheme having been revealed in an article in The Atlantic, he and his legal team are now openly endorsing a strategy to win by defying the voters' will. How would the Trump scheme supposedly work? We know this part, I think. Imagine that after all the votes are counted, Biden has won 288 electoral votes to Trump's 250. Game over, right? No, not if Trump's people have their way. They are currently doing everything they can to suppress votes in multiple states, but they are particularly focused on Pennsylvania and its 20 electoral votes, which they understand to be key to their win-while-losing strategy. If Biden's 288 electoral college votes include Pennsylvania's 20, stripping those away from Biden would push him below the 270-vote majority threshold. Republicans are preparing to wipe out the likely choice of Keystone States voters by having the Pennsylvania legislature declare that the state's vote was fraudulent and then designating a slate of 20 electors to support Trump. In the not that far-fetched scenario we have described, that would put Trump at exactly 270. However, Pennsylvania's governor is a Democrat who would veto any effort to circumvent existing state election law. Supreme Court precedent makes clear, to whatever extent that's honored, that Republican-dominated legislatures cannot legally bypass their own governors to change the rules governing federal elections. As two of the authors of this column and a colleague recently demonstrated, that done over at Dorf on Law. And I've seen the argument, and it seems correct, that you can't, under normal law with respect for precedent and everything, you can't write the governor out of his role in rejecting legislation. His veto can be overridden, but if they don't have 2/3 or whatever it takes I assume that they modeled their constitution on the federal one, but I don't know, whatever it takes to overrule or override a veto in Pennsylvania, they apparently don't have, and you can't just change law despite the objection of the governor. If Pennsylvania or any other state wants to change its voting laws, it must do so in the normal way, not by having the legislature go rogue. If Biden wins more votes in Pennsylvania, Governor Tom Wolf would certify the Biden electors to the Electoral College. What if the Republican majority in the Pennsylvania legislature purported to designate the Trump electors anyway? That's a good question. They might just. There would then be two competing slates of electors in Pennsylvania, the governor's slate based on Biden's popular vote win, and the rogue state legislature's slate based on its unlawful endorsement of Trump's contrived claims of voter fraud. What then? A federal statute, the Electoral Count Act, we've been over it, specifies that Congress settles disputes over electors, but that would lead to a stalemate, as the Republican-dominated Senate and the Democratic-dominated House would likely disagree on which Pennsylvania slate to recognize, unless, of course, the Democrats win back control of the Senate in this year's elections, given that all of this would be determined by the Congress that's sworn in on January 3rd, 2021. As we discussed with Joan. The Electoral Count Act addresses this contingency as well. It says unequivocally that the votes of the electors whose appointments shall have been certified by the executive of the state are the ones that count. Thus, a partisan dispute arising out of competing slates of electors from Pennsylvania or Michigan or Wisconsin or North Carolina, which also have Democratic governors, would be resolved in favor of the Democratic governor's choice. Biden wins, unless they throw all law out the window, and that's something to keep in mind. Team Trump cannot be expected to give up, however. Perhaps they would next claim that the Electoral Count Act is unconstitutional in specifying a procedure that has details going beyond what appears in Article 2 or the 12th Amendment. Making this claim would be the height of hypocrisy, of course, because the Supreme Court relied on Florida's supposed wish to comply with the Electoral Count Act as its basis for the Bush v. Gore case. But as we have seen in the GOP rush to fill the Supreme Court vacancy created by Ginsburg's death, hypocrisy is the party's brand. Accordingly, we can expect the Trump team to argue that with Pennsylvania's ballots in dispute, the presidential selection falls to the House of Representatives, and even though Democrats hold a clear majority in the House, the 12th Amendment specifies each state delegation gets only one vote. So, absent a shift due to the coming election, a shift that Pelosi and Democrats are working hard to achieve, but obviously can't guarantee, Republicans would have the edge. But Republicans cannot have their cake and eat it too. They cannot plausibly agree that the 12th Amendment's silences override the Electoral Count Act while ignoring the amendment's plain language. If neither slate of Pennsylvania's electors is recognized, as was discussed as one of the outcomes in one of those war game articles we read, Biden's 268 votes would still fall short of a majority of the 538 total. However, the 12th Amendment does not say anything about those votes. Instead, it says, the person having the greatest number of votes shall be the president, if such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed. I see where they're going with this one. We have italicized that last word, appointed, to emphasize that the Constitution does not say that a candidate must win a majority of the potential number of theoretically eligible electors who might, ordinarily I'll add, have been appointed. He or she must win only a majority of the electors who were actually appointed. In the scenario in which the Electoral Count Act is set aside so that Pennsylvania's votes don't count, again here, just as a refresher, if they manage to set aside the Electoral Count Act, which says the governor's slate is the winner, if they manage to get past that and say, okay, it's up in the air, we'll weigh governor's slate versus legislature slate, if that should happen, and the decision is, well, we'll just not count either slate. Well, then Pennsylvania's votes don't count. Its 20 votes are subtracted from both the numerator and the denominator in this equation, and now Biden's assumed, in this case, 268 votes would be a majority of the 518 votes cast by the whole number of electors appointed. Just as the text says, Biden would win the Electoral College, meaning that the decision would not go to the House. Interesting twist, good idea. There's apparently precedent for it. Historical practice confirms that the Constitution means what it says, unless 6 justices say it doesn't. Only 2 presidential elections have ever been decided by the House of Representatives. There was the 1800, Thomas Jefferson and his running mate Aaron Burr receiving the same number of votes because they were running mates, but then Burr got weird. The denominator issue never arose because it was irrelevant. A tie produces no winner regardless of the denominator. Neither did the denominator arise in the election of 1824 when the House decided the contest because the Electoral College votes were split among 4 candidates. Since then, no presidential election has gone to the House, 1824. The 2 subsequent contested presidential elections were resolved by other means. In 2000, despite calls by some Democrats for a contest in Congress, Al Gore conceded the election following the Supreme Court's controversial decision. In the election of 1876, 4 states sent competing slates of electors. Had Congress deadlocked over which slate to count, it could have declared the Democratic candidate Samuel Tilden the winner, as he had more undisputed electoral votes than did Republican Rutherford B. Hayes. Excluding the contested states' votes would have lowered the denominator sufficiently for Tilden to win, but Congress did not deadlock. Instead, desperately wishing to avoid a renewal of the Civil War, it enacted a law creating a special commission to determine the actual outcome in the contested states. After the commission found for Hayes, he became president. The 1876 resolution was hardly ideal, mostly because it resulted from a deal by which Republicans got the presidency and Democrats, then predominantly based in the South, got the end of Reconstruction and the start of Jim Crow, which sucked. To avoid a similar fiasco in the future, Congress enacted the Electoral Count Act that we now expect Trump to seek to circumvent. But so far as the current question is concerned, 2 facts stand out. First, as was explained, the denominator issue simply did not arise in the 1876 election aftermath. And second, to the extent one thinks that congressional Democrats were foolish for not pushing to exclude the votes of contested states from the denominator to give Tilden a victory, such foolishness has little to no bearing on the meaning of the 12th Amendment, ratified over 7 decades earlier, and plainly requiring a majority of only the electors actually appointed. On the only plausible reading of the Constitution's text, Trump's effort to throw the election into the House of Representatives should fail. Last section here, is that right? Or maybe there's more. The standoff would end with Biden taking the oath of office. They predict. To say that Trump's House gambit should fail under the Constitution's plain language does not tell us what would happen on the ground. How would the post-election conflict play out in practice? Let us consider the best-case scenario for Trump if he loses not only the popular vote but also the electoral vote, by any fair reckoning. Nonetheless, Republican-dominated legislatures would quickly get to work invalidating their own voters' choice, creating weeks of uncertainty as challenges worked their way through the courts. In the end, would it all be decided by the courts? That's clearly what Trump and the Republicans are hoping, as Trump has openly and repeatedly said he's eager to replace Ginsburg with someone who'll vote for him in any Supreme Court litigation later this year. And maybe the Supreme Court, as newly constituted, would indeed ignore the law and all of its own relevant precedents. Short of that, however, the court would appropriately treat the kind of question we're considering now to be non-justiciable. That is, a political question. We've talked about that the courts should leave to the elected representatives of the country. Before the electors are designated, there might be state law issues for state courts to resolve, but unlike in the 2000 presidential post-election litigation, once the Electoral College convenes, there would not even be a fig leaf of justiciable federal question to warrant involvement of the U.S. Supreme Court, unless they just said, to hell with it. But in our example above, Trump's people would be demanding that the House convene to decide the presidential election, assuming they had retained their 26-24 edge in the delegations. But the leadership of the House would rightly say that the election had already been decided, leaving nothing for the House to do. Trump could fume and rage, but under the Constitution's plain language, the House would simply not have the legal authority to vote on an election that had already been decided. On January 20th, 2021, then, Joe Biden would take the oath of office as the duly elected president of the United States, having not only won the popular vote, but having won a majority of the electoral votes that had been cast. Trump would then face whatever awaits him in his post-presidential life. Very interesting. Okay, so I come away with a better impression of what they have to say, and I like the argument. You would just basically be saying that if you throw out both slates, in this instance, from Pennsylvania, then those electors from Pennsylvania are not appointed. They haven't been accepted. They had their names put on a list. There was a signature attached to the list from somebody important in Pennsylvania, but they haven't actually been appointed as members of the Electoral College. Although, it's possible that the argument goes the other way, and one side says, well, these guys aren't members of the Electoral College, and the other side argues they are. They have been appointed to the Electoral College. You're just choosing not to count them as members of the Electoral College. Of course, if that choice not to count either slate is made by Mike Pence, it's awfully difficult for them to shift the blame to us for saying that they're somehow not appointed, or that perhaps they had been appointed. I guess you could always say, yeah, they were appointed, but Pence says, though they were appointed, we don't accept their votes, so they still go in the denominator. So I don't know. It's not ironclad, and of course, as Armando has told you 100 times, a Supreme Court determined to have its outcome will have its outcome, and very little that we can do about it. Unless another suggestion, which came my way, I think via email yesterday, and so it'll become a little bit more difficult to track down, but I think, damn it, not that easy to find. But, well, you know who you are. And maybe it came to me via Twitter, and I've just since lost track of it. But it was one of several suggestions along the same lines. In this case, pointing me to the Vox version of it. But I have two other articles tucked away that make similar arguments, but they are dangerous ones. What does Vox have to say here? Dylan Matthews, probably one of the more dangerous people to spend a lot of time listening to over at Vox. The Supreme Court is too powerful and anti-democratic. Here's how we can scale back its influence. Something that you might be tempted to explore, given that we've concluded, along with Armando, that, look, if judges can simply say, to hell with everything, if we have 5 votes, we can stand everything on its head and make law out of nothing, then, yeah, you'll want to scale it back. This, I think, drawing on the same line of reasoning and going pretty much in the same direction as, like I said, 2 other pieces that are tucked not that far down in pocket that I don't think we can find it quickly enough, although we're coming again to the end of the show. Now here we are. The New York Times has one piece, and The Week. The Week was the first one that I noticed out of the box. Ryan Cooper, and this will give you the idea. Democrats have a better option than court packing, says Ryan Cooper. And in the New York Times, it was Jamel Bowie with this piece. And I feel better about listening to Jamel about these things. But Down with Judicial Supremacy is the title of his opinion piece. The Supreme Court was never meant to be the only arbiter of the meaning of the Constitution. Taken together, these two articles anyway, which I did read, and I think this third one, which I haven't had the chance to read just yet, basically saying, judicial review, which is what he means here by judicial supremacy. Judicial review is an invention, and they would perhaps say a fabrication, invented post-framing of the Constitution, and of course not included anywhere in the plain text of the Constitution. And they try their best to explain it to you in civics and in U.S. history in high school. That, well, the thing you need to know is we definitely do use this concept now, and the judicial review concept seems to work, and everybody has kind of bought into it. But it was, they will tell you outright, fabricated by Chief Justice Marshall in the Marbury versus Madison case. And everybody says, I can remember that. That's alliterative, Marbury versus Madison. That's all I really need to know. But yes, looking back on the case, and the motivations behind the case give you, maybe we'll spend some time on it sometime, just as a refresher. But we have actually explored them on the air here. Not that I can remember which episode it was, but there's a highly questionable decision. And so now, in these latter days, you can come to the conclusion that maybe the Supreme Court isn't and never was supposed to be the final arbiter of everything, and maybe they can't just overrule the Electoral Count Act and the 12th Amendment if they feel like it. But of course, that opens up the door to any number of shenanigans
from Daily Codes
not so
Radio
safe
on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, that brings us to the end of our show for today. Thankfully, we have Justice Putnam following us up again on the network, the Netroots Radio Network, to pick up on all the slack that we may have missed today. The Proud Boys are in the report. The police chief in Little Rock, Arkansas makes the report. There's even a report from all the way over in far Japan. Stay tuned.